Next talk titled Cyber Resilience in the Era of Advanced Persistent Threats. Our distinguished speaker is Dr. Salam Baniahmed, Specialist Engineer, Cyber Physical Resiliency, Eaton Research Lab. Dr. Salam is a senior member of IEEE, where he leads research programs at Eaton on topics such as cyber resiliency for smart grid applications. His role features persistent efforts in harmonizing the cyber and physical layers of critical infrastructure towards resiliency measures and creating new technology to boost system resiliency against cyber incidents. Dr. Baniahmed is a senior member of IEEE. He serves in various committees for IEEE standards development. He was a past chair for IEEE Smart Grid Education Committee and a current member of various IEEE technical committees. It is my distinguished pleasure to invite you for CARS Symposium. Thank you for accepting my invite, and the floor is yours.
All right. Thank you very much. So you need coffee, I'm going to wake you up another way, so better listen. So thanks for the introduction, Prakash, and thanks for the opportunity to speak to this great audience. Do I control the slides, or you do? Do I have the option? Great, great. Got it, thanks. Hopefully I'm not moving fast. All right. All right. Where's the, what am I pointing at? There you go. So, yeah, cyber resilience, that's one. And the era of advanced persistent threat, that's two. To me, a quick note here, advanced persistent threat is someone, when it comes to power systems application, for example, it's someone they're not just want to attack my system or get into my system or whatever that is. It's someone who is capable of creating the highest possible disturbance down to the fact that they're going to be able to shut down my system. That's the advanced persistent threat. It's someone, not an artificial intelligence algorithm that's running somewhere and trying to get into my system, providing all these means to disturb. But to me, it's basically someone who's knowledgeable on my system, knowledgeable on my devices, being able to create the worst case for me. That's what keeps me up at night. And in order to do that, we do cyber resilience, which is basically a resilient application or a resilient power system or resilient whatever application that you have. It's an industrial control system, but it's resilient to cyber incidents. And keep in mind that we're talking cyber incidents because they're not all attacks. We might have faults, we might have failures, something can happen, device malfunction could be interpreted as a cyber incident. That's why we consider that. 5 minutes on the first slide, that's a good start. Just for people to get a good sense on why me and my location in the map that allows me to, or help me to start this kind of concept and maybe push it through from the industry perspective. So at Eaton, I'm not sure how many people have heard about Eaton before, but we are a power management company. We're almost everywhere. We do parts, we do devices, we do PLCs, we do controllers, we do software, and recently we have this Bright Layer, which basically creates multi-layered system for utilities or for system owners to maintain, control, and of course support their critical infrastructure. As you can see here, we have our electrical business and we have our industrial business. Each do separate things, but we work closely when it comes to manufacturing devices or coming up with certain applications that could be supported by our software and hardware. Where am I located in the map? So I am part of Eaton Research Labs. We have many, let's say, disciplines that we're working on. We have power electronics, energy systems, additive manufacturing, advanced materials, processes, digital design, and we add more things as we move forward. But right now, I am part of the grid intelligence team, part of energy systems, and I'm located physically in Denver, Colorado. Actually, it's Golden to the west, closer to the mountains, but this is where I enjoy working, sometimes from home. Sometimes I have to be in the lab doing hands-on work. Believe it or not, I still do that. A good description, I'll leave that up to you. This is just talks about what we do at Eaton Research Labs, our impact and everything. Looks like I have to put that here because, sometimes people get confused. Eaton, hardware, power management, and, grid intelligence, it's sometimes confusing. So this is our impact to the environment, to the society, critical infrastructure, you name it. So I'm not going to go through it, everything. So I'm going to jump right on it. This is an image, shows like a typical application, power systems. And we're looking at, from transmission all the way down to residential, AMIs, all of these applications, demand response. You can see there's a lot to worry about in these kind of applications, especially if we're talking about moving the electron from the generation side all the way to the consumer. And to do that, we have to consider all of the possibilities that will make the overall process optimal. And recently, we've been using grid modernization term to make this happen. To make it optimal, save money, save energy, save whatever you want to save. But basically, if you want to modernize your grid, you will have to add the computer science scent to it as much as you could. And the more you're actually doing that, you're adding more burden to your system, meaning that you have to add more concerns, and most of these concerns are related to cybersecurity. And basically, if I have a critical system, I have to worry about the operational side. I'm not biased to that. I know Bill was talking, about, I have to make sure that the system is secure. Then I need to worry about the operational. But if you talk from the OT side, as a power engineer, power systems engineer, or systems engineer, I want to make sure that my system is actually working before I overlay it with this cyber layer or before I connect it. As Bill mentioned, sometimes I make it work, then I need to connect to the internet, I need to get permissions, I need to get that, and sometimes there's a no. We'll talk about that, but yeah, so there's always a no, especially if it exposes the system to more dangerous cases where it doesn't only expose that specific subsystem, it actually exposes the overall OT network, and sometimes would be the enterprise network. So in general, and stating the fact that everybody from DOE, DOD, and DHS, recently they've been talking to critical systems owners as think of your system as a target all the time. And that's why we do all of these cybersecurity measures. We add all of these security layers just to make sure that we make it harder. We make it harder for the attackers to get into the system or do whatever they can, even if that happens remotely. Thinking of that, we always consider that the attack is going to happen at any time. And this might relate to the cyber kill chain that Lockheed Martin is working on, or they come up with it. But this is a simplified one where it distinguishes between intrusion and cyber attack. So intrusion, to me, at least personally, you don't have to quote me or quote me, intrusion is something that's already happening in all systems. Not necessarily somebody is actually intended to do that, but the fact that the system is in danger or there's a possibility for the system to be disrupted is considered intrusion to me. It could be a code that's sitting there that may come up later, and we've seen how many CVEs that comes out. And right now, we're sitting, CISA sends an email, hey, a new vulnerability came out. So every day there's something that comes out that tells me that the intrusion is already there, but it may not have been exploited yet. And that's what concerns me more. We're aware of all of these possibilities for the systems to get attacked. We have vulnerabilities in devices. We have systems that maybe they have not been patched yet. We know what the problem is, but they haven't been patched, like 0 day. But they haven't been exploited necessarily, or maybe they have. It's just I wasn't informed. But in general, if we're thinking about the fact that we are going to get attacked as a system at some point, I have to have the plan B for myself. And maybe I'm biased a little bit. I stand right in the middle between cyber and power because, given my background in education and the practical work, and right now I'm doing research, which is lower TRLs, it makes me think a little bit more about, what exactly am I trying to protect here? Sometimes from the IT side, from the cybersecurity side, we have people, their goal is to make sure that there are no intrusion or successful intrusions. And we've seen, from the panelists and many talks before me that they're all focusing on, how my performance is being measured. Some of them, they want to make sure that nobody's going to get in. Somebody got to make sure that, okay, my operational system has to work, regardless if I have certain limitations or restrictions that's coming to me by IT. And of course, thinking about, these different perspectives, this creates a problem that was brought up by many people, especially, Bill, that, they're not going to be able to talk to each other and tackle the problem together. And that's why, focusing from my side, at least, on the cyber attack, which is exactly where the actual, let's say, the actions from the adversary actually happens. The time between the attack and the response, it's relative. So it depends on, the policy. Whatever the system that was attacked, was I informed of it? Did I detect it? Did I detect the actual attack? Was I able to, at least understand what was the problem and so I can create or at least dispatch the right people? So to me, this is time consuming. And thinking about this, the response, whenever I start the response must be minimized as well. So I'm looking to minimize the red portion and the blue portion, the cyber attack and the response, minimize it to a level where I could be comfortable, at least, with my operations, and just to make sure that my system will survive an attack, even if I had to degrade it, to degrade the operation at a system level where I can bound it by, let's say, a different control method, or maybe allows a different algorithm to run to make sure that I protect my assets from being damaged and protect any potential cascading failures. When we think about our power systems, where it's all interconnected, regardless if it's at the cyber side or at the physical side. Electrons move around. And if I talk about advanced persistent threat, that person or organization or country, whoever is trying to attack my system, the goal might not even to bring down the system. It's just basically creating disturbance. Or maybe creating false data or injecting false data so my AI algorithms that optimize the overall process will fail down the line. So I'm not thinking about these 2 seconds. I'm thinking about, when can the impact actually be seen in my system if I have to worry about the operational side. Once I have the response, minimize the response and maybe make it a little bit more traceable, I can go back to normal operation through a seamless recovery method, which is one of the research focuses that I'm hoping people will still looking at, which is the restoration part, but we need to consider that from the cyber-physical aspect, and we'll come to that. I'm not going to spend much time here, but this is a good example on one of the efforts that they try, people try to understand, how an attacker would think or, trace what the attacker would do. Starting from the reconnaissance side until, we will have the actions. If you can see here, in the background, you can see the black shaded or the gradient. The main work that's been done right now is starting from the end and try to push backwards. Whenever I can stop an attacker or an advanced persistent threat, is considered better. So the more you go to the left, the better. But right now, we've been seeing, sometimes we have this, we succeed in doing that. We're able to do that, especially if we detect things at early stages. But sometimes That doesn't work. We do have successful attacks, and they actually impact our system negatively. And worst case scenario would be attacking the system that will impact the overall reputation of the organization. So I had a whole different slide talking about what would be the short-term and long-term impacts on critical infrastructure owners when it comes to successful cyber attacks. But at least from my role, from what I can do is basically start to think about the physical aspect and change my perspective to the overall system as a cyber-physical system rather than a cyber system or a physical system. And this way we can actually have people talk to each other because we're going to have a same end goal. And that's going to be helpful. As a generic cyber system or a cyber-physical system, this is from the CISA website. You can see here, most of the times, I need to stay close to this guy. Okay, so most of the times, people, you will see people focusing right here, right here, right here, right here. And I feel the pain of Bill, because Bill, probably you go all the way across these things. So you deal with the organizational IT security, SCADA, and all the way down to the OT side. Sometimes people, they think of the SCADA as part of the OT side. I have, different or mixed feelings about that because my vision to the OT side, or at least, maybe you can correct me, Bill, basically if I have an OT side, I only have IEDs here. I don't even have workstations or anything else. I only have devices that's connected directly to the bare metal, which is basically the electrical system, and it's monitoring that, controlling that, doing whatever it does. But this is my definition, at least to the OT side. So thinking about this, and we've seen, the most, I don't want to say most famous example, because it's famous because of many reasons, but the Ukraine attack, it was actually, remote attack, and what happened, or Ukraine cyber attack, sorry. So in 2015 or 2016, I forgot, what, or maybe there was two. But the main point was, they used, phishing, they got through the IT network and blah, blah, blah. But the main concern was they managed to get into here. Open, close breakers, do whatever they want. And actually, they managed to block the control center from doing anything else. And that's why, if we focus in here, but if we keep thinking, security, 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 and whoever is working in here doesn't care, that doesn't work because eventually they're going to get hit. And once that, and sometimes, they're going to get hit not through this system, they're going to get hit through their actually physical side because their devices are, sometimes they're in the, geographically, they're just, diverse. They're actually everywhere. So I can get to that easily, especially for thinking about substations. You can say they have some kind of they're surrounded or something, but somebody can get in, just plug in something and leave. Then they can do whatever they want. It's as easy as that. I'm not trying to simplify it, but it's possible. So in general, my point here is the danger doesn't only come from the IT side. Actually, right now, the way of thinking is that the OT side may expose the OT and the IT and the overall enterprise system to potential attacks. And that's why creating some kind of a method in here to, let's say, isolate or perform any kind of function that will help me contain that issue within the OT. Even if I have a complex OT system, being able to isolate some of that OT system or subsystems to allow the rest of the OT system to survive, that would be a big win. The only problem is it's very complicated, really, really complicated. I've been pushing this for the past 3 years, and sometimes I have trouble communicating that to people. I had to change my story many times, or at least update my story many times, because different people had different concerns. And they might not even see, why am I doing this? Is it worth it? How much is it going to cost me? Especially for someone from the industry, is that something that's going to make money? It is, but sometimes you have to think about, your cybersecurity budget versus your operational budget. they have to overlap, then you're going to have cyber resiliency budget. But to do that, that's going to require some finance guys, and I'm not really ready to deal with any finance guys right now. It's a whole different conversation. So just to summarize, we have a lot of concerns, especially if we have hundreds and hundreds of devices, sometimes thousands of devices that's sitting in the field. And the more we have, the more we expose the system to potential attacks. And of course, it doesn't have to be physically there. Sometimes it's basically, as I mentioned, it's a code that's injected there, and it's timed to run at certain times. And there was, I remember there was an attack for 3 years. The code was injected, and after 3 years, it clicked. It just ran. It didn't do much on the data side, but it definitely created some kind of disturbance. And it took them, I think, a couple of weeks or 3 weeks until they performed all these hygiene on the physical devices, controllers, PLCs, and everything, until they figured out what it is. So that time is not helping anyone. The time between the actual attack, where the action actually happens, until you actually try to figure out and try to clean it up and maybe give the green light to the system operator to bring back the system and run it in a normal way, if you could. Earlier this year, I was in contact with Utility X, and I discussed a rumor with them about something happened within their system. The guy, I don't want to say literally, but he ran away. Because, and I understand, these things cannot be shared outside the organization. As I mentioned, there's a lot that comes into play when the reputation is into play. But learning from all of these problems, I think it will help each other if we understand what happened. But again, it's like a chicken and the egg. I cannot tell you, but I need you to help me. Again, I need to help you, but I need to thinking about this as like a back and forth conversation, it doesn't help anyone. That's why, I've seen, many efforts with the grid exercise where they created like ESIAC. I think they create some kind of platform where information about these events are shared between utilities, but they're not yet shared with the industry, although the industry would, really mess up that ASAP. Think about it as a PhD student who's looking for data sets, but you don't have that, because it's a new concept. And you have to create your own in order to do your research, but that research is going to be a little bit compromised because you created your own data, so you might have made it fit your own. So we're going towards the right path, and I've seen many efforts where we can create like a shared information in order to perform all of these R&D work. And of course, create some kind of an environment where we can deploy it in real systems, higher TRLs, because whatever we do here, I think is going to be a waste of time and a waste of resources if it's done for the sake of, proof of concepts. Ask me about it. I've been doing it for the past 4 years. I'm suffering here. And that's why I love talking to smart people just like you. Because part of what I'm doing is basically educating and showing people, hey, if you're talking to the right person, you will find the perfect partnership. And basically, people will start gather and talk to each other and making sure that, oh, okay, you know what? I can help with this small part. I can help with that small part. It's not a one company's job. It's not a utility's job. It's not a system owner's job. It's not even the government's job. It's everybody who's going to come into play. And that's why, one of the other slides, I should have had this slide here. I'm going to talk about the cyber-informed engineering strategy, which was published by DOE, and I think it's one of the right steps towards the goal of creating a cyber physical system where we can actually ease the tension between IT and OT. I'm talking about people here, just to make sure that everyone can actually do their job, and part of their job is to have a common goal, which is protecting the operational side and ensuring that the system will be maintaining operational even during an attack. I'm not saying afterwards, during an attack. A lot of details into that. One of the funny things, I tried to come up with my own formula on this. I've seen this a lot, trying to measure threats. Hey, it's the capability of the advanced persistent threat or the adversary, plus their intent and plus their opportunity, and that equals your threat. That's how much you're in danger. I keep looking into this, and this is always unknown. Because I don't know if I'm dealing with an organization or a person or even an algorithm that's running somewhere and it found my system and is trying to explore what I can do with it. And of course, if we're thinking about the capability, if I know my capabilities, I can create more intent. So they're related. Same thing for the opportunity. Because they say, okay, they're going to find the opportunity and get you right there. No. If I know what am I capable of, and I know my intent, I'm smart enough to create disturbance, it's easy. I can create the opportunity. I'll find it. You need to think about as a hacker or an adversary or an enemy, whatever you want to call it. So this way of looking at the threat doesn't help much. I know it's mostly for illustration and everything, but the more I think about it, the more it pisses me off, because if we try to quantify threat, I don't think it matters. But if we try to quantify the probability of a threat, I think that would be closer to the fact that, okay, we're getting there. And from what I've seen, from talking to people from IT, OT side, seeing a lot of reports, public reports, CEOs and everything, the probability of a threat is always 1. It's just that step to make it a little bit less impactful that would make it a little bit easier to absorb. And I think from Bill's and everybody's talks, they were talking about, the impact, thinking about my system and what would be the impact of an intrusion or an attack or whatever that is. It's good to know all of these things. But if I already know my system, if I already know what the impact would be from a cyber incident, assuming that I covered all of the potential use cases for an attack, attack vectors, attack paths, and everything, if I think about it this way, why don't I just take the extra step and add a method or an algorithm or a capability or a device or whatever that is that would allow my system to survive even during the cyber incident and while the adversary is within the network. We have that for the IT. We know how to isolate. We have systems that automatically just isolates whatever the adversary in the system. Even if it's like a simple mistake that could be interpreted as a cyber incident or a cyber attack. But if we're able to do that for an OT system, that would be a little bit more impactful in terms of maintaining operational. Because I'm not trying to protect data only. I'm trying to protect operations. And that could be a blackout that could impact hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people. So I think from my perspective at least, and I'm one person here, it's worth doing the research on that. And for that, we need to change the way of thinking. And one of my favorite slides is basically right here. They call it secure design principles, and that aligns actually with the cyber-informed engineering, but I don't think it relates to the secure side. It has at least at 50%, but it mostly looking into the physical aspect of the system. I'm going to skip through everything because the first 3 are basically related to the security aspect. Once you touch on the making compromise detection easier, this is where it throws me off, because they're saying, okay, establish the context, which is basically know your physical system. Don't just overlay a security cover on it and walk with it. You have to know your physical system. Make compromise difficult, which is a huge part of that. Actually, if I want to make this relative, this part would be the biggest one, because this is what needs needs to have the most. Because if we have cyber resiliency in our system, that doesn't mean we don't need cybersecurity. Actually, it's two things that are working together, and it should be there. And without it, it could impact negatively. Even if you have a cyber resiliency within your OT environment, it could be exploited by itself. Making disruption difficult. Of course, this is where cyber resiliency touches on that. Even if somebody is trying to mess with your system, make sure that it could be hardening in real time. And I'm not saying hardening in the network side, but hardening in a way where you can verify data commands, you can verify all of these, let's say, protocol-related or communication-related aspects, but at the same time, since you know your application, you have a deterministic way, or your system would be deterministic. If it deviates from that, then I have to have a different action based on this. And of course, reducing the impact of compromise. If I know my system is going to get impacted, why don't I just create some kind of a point where I can say, okay, you're out, you're out, you're out, and survive the rest of the system. There are many methods. I'm trying to think out loud here, and that's why there are a lot of research that could be done. It's just, we need to just change a little bit of perspective on how to look at the system from a cyber-physical perspective in its true meaning, which is basically not only creating models, but actually creating some kind of models that will include the electrical and the cyber side of the system as well. This is pure repetitive. I'm going to jump through that. I just want to point out to this one. I think this would be a good place. Pretty much everyone here, heard about it. It came out in June. It talks about cyber-informed engineering. It shifts the mindset a little bit to the resiliency aspect in a way. And it tells you, okay, it's good to have a system that's running and you secure it, but if there's a way where you could, let's say, redesign or reshape your system where it could be resilient as well, that would be a good win, a big win. Especially if we're talking about, complicating things from the communication side, or if this system is maybe up to date or it's time for this system to be upgraded, it's good to include some resiliency functions. I would refer to that. And I would benefit from the NIST 816 Volume 2, I guess. Some concepts are there that's going to be really, I would think that would be a good starting point for someone who wants to start the research. So in general, this is just to sum up on what I said. Change of perspective is really needed. Thinking about the nature of the system. It's not a power system anymore, so the resiliency means something different there. And it's not a cyber system anymore because resiliency means something different there. A cyber physical system, it has a different nature of resiliency that we need to consider. And of course, if we think about what's been done right now, security that we do every day, and it's really important, we focus on the device level, and of course, there are some system level functions that we need to consider, and it's pretty much specialized, meaning that it focuses on certain functions, and we need to make sure that this is, this is going the right way. For the resiliency aspect, it's pretty much hands-on. That doesn't mean that this is not hands-on, but hands-on meaning closer to the electrical side. This is what I mean by hands-on. And of course, it's interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary people. I think Craig mentioned that, their team, they have people from every single discipline, which really helps. So trying to get all of these disciplines to work together to reach the same goal, that would be terrific. And I think, I'm not saying that it's too late for, someone like me or someone like who's been there for a long time. Basically, having students gaining interest in this topic starting now, I think we will be in a good shape in 5 years, even if they're undergrad students. I've met undergrad students who's really interested in the topic even before they talk to me, and I have a couple of interns right now. They're really smart. I like these guys. Students are amazing. I don't even tell them what to do. I tell them, hey, that's our goal, and they make it happen. They choose their own path, and they tell me what needs to be done. So having students starting this kind of thinking in order to achieve these goals, that would be great. And to me, a starting point, the goal from the overall thing, it's basically the incident response management. Assume the worst, that's fine. Assume the worst, what now? There's some kind of a timeline where the incident management happens, and the human factor is a big part of that. The problem is, as I mentioned, time is not our friend during a cyber incident. It's the attacker's friend. The problem as well for us, something that we're missing is, and of course the adversary is always having is basically patience. They have patience. They chose the right time. They choose the right method. They do their own research. But unfortunately, sometimes for us, we try to, make the operational side work and make the security side work as soon as possible to make sure, which is understandable because that's part of our jobs. But, it's the conversation that's not happening the appropriate way, unfortunately. So the focus would be on speeding up the incident response, meaning minimizing the human factor. And I'm saying minimizing, the minimizing part could be down to 70%. That's way less than where we are right now, I guess. And improve forensics data preservation, which is creating a black box for our OT system. In case I don't have visibility to the OT system from the IT side, I need to make sure that whenever I'm able to fetch any data from that system, I need to have data. And the example that I gave about having a conversation with that utility, they said the forensics is still going. And believe me, the attack has been going on, or the attack happened 2 years ago. That's the investigation. It's still going. Poof. Seamless cyber physical restoration, which is basically if we have a strong, or at least if we established a way where we can respond to a cyber incident in a very, let's say, operational manner, which maintains the operation, even if we had to degrade to a certain level of operation, I should be able to come back easily because I just need to trace back. And of course, I have to perform all of these cyber hygiene, all of these processes that will take me there. But I need to get the green light from the forensics sometimes because I'm not sure, even if I turn back the power, if I'm able to turn back the power, is my system is going to operate the normal way or not? Because the adversary, even if they're not physically there, their impact might be still there. They might have injected code, they might have changed configurations, passwords, whatever, you name it. That's why we have to perform all of these hygiene, and imagine having thousands of devices that needs to be, let's say, monitored or maybe checked for all of these processes. That takes a long time. As I mentioned, time is not my friend. Look at my picture 5 years ago. I'm getting older. I know. All right, so I'm not going to take long. This is a slide that actually, sorry, 1 minute? Of course, yeah. So this slide I gave, it's basically touches on the power electronics side. One example, thinking about cyber physical. I encourage people who's interested in cyber, doing cyber and everything, get into the physical aspect. Look up power systems. They have a lot of power electronics devices that's capable of taking commands, directing power, isolating areas, things like that. This is a good way to add to your, let's say, cyber physical system. Look into, don't limit yourself to certain controllers or anything. I know you can do proof of concept using Python code. Sky's the limit, simulation and everything. But talk to an industry. Hey, I have this complex algorithm, or I can make some complex algorithm, or I'm not even sure if it's complex or not. Can I test it within your device? Can I get certain access? Always ask a question. There's no harm. And I know most of you do that already, but it's always the answer would be, the easiest answer would be, no, can you stick to what we have there and everything. So there's a lot, and myself, I'm ready to be part of any research effort that takes us through that. And I'm talking to students, talking to professors, researchers. I'm open to collaboration. I've been pushing this for the past 3 years, and I'm going to be pushing it more. So, but I have to improve my story so I don't get older. I apologize if I took much of your time, and I know that this is the third session after a panel and another talk and listening to me. Even my wife doesn't like listening to me, so poor guys.
They are now desperately ready for
I know, that's the goal. You need coffee. So thank you very much.
questions.
Feel free to
Any
reach out.
questions for Dr. Salam? Any questions?
It's the coffee. It's the coffee.
What are the legal implications that you see at Eaton?
When it comes to,
Attacks,
so we're talking, are you talking about Eaton or are we talking about the cyber resiliency in general?
you can talk in general.
Well, I've seen, legal-wise, I think Bill can touch on that. It's, that's not my field. Actually, when it comes to an NDA, I go to people. But from what I see, as at least from something that I actually observed, legal could cause a lot of issues when it comes to being attacked. And I think I'm not the right person to talk about these things. But keep in mind that the more legal problems that comes out of it, the more you have to pay for cyber insurance. I tried to look up, some information on that, and believe it or not, cyber insurance went poof through the roof the past 2 years. I've heard that from a couple of people from, some legal, I think institutes or something that deal with all these policies and things like that. That I know for a fact that legal is a big issue. So.
Thank you, Dr. Salam. I'm going to invite our Associate VP of National Security and Director for School of Electrical Engineering and Computer Science, Dr. Ryan Adams, to honor Dr. Salam's plaque, what we have for his time and contribution.
Sure. Let me just clarify really quick. I'm the Associate Dean for National Security. The Associate VPR is Mark Askelson. But I'm still pleased to be here to honor Dr. Salam Baniahmed.
He's taking pictures.
Okay, it is my great pleasure to introduce Catherine Liu as our next speaker here. She is a senior